Welcome back to the channel. There were lots of questions about TV licensing following my video yesterday, and I've contacted the press office of TV licensing to get their definitive response on a particular question. More about that later. But first of all, welcome back, or if you're new to me, I'm a barrister who helps you understand law. So in this video, I'm going to go through some of your questions and comments that you left on the previous video, because some of them were repeated, so I thought it'd be useful to just come back to you in another video. One question says, does Virgin count, as in Virgin TV? So if you are watching or recording any live program, then yes, you need the TV license. If you are only watching the on-demand services, albeit perhaps through Virgin, then no, you don't. And if you installed it for the purpose of watching or recording live TV, then you do. But if you only installed it for the purpose of catch-up or those sort of things, then you don't. So yes, it might sound confusing, but it relates specifically to live TV, whether you're watching it or recording it or installed it for the purpose of watching it or recording it, or of course BBC iPlayer. For those, you need the TV license. The next one following closely on, and there were a number of different permutations of the same question, asks, do the +1 channels need a license? Yes, they do, because although they are 1 hour later, they are still broadcast 1 hour later. So think of it as the original broadcast being at timestamp 0, and then +1 is 1 hour later, so they are part of the same broadcast, they are just broadcast 1 hour later. So it's still a live broadcast for the purpose of the legislation, and you still need a TV license. The next question I found very interesting: could the TV detector vans count as fraud? Now, if we look at the definition of fraud for a bit of tongue-in-cheek discussion here, fraud is a false representation which is made dishonestly to make a gain. So if you think about this logically, if they made a statement that there are these TV detector vans that come out and spy on your property, but in fact that was false and dishonest, and they're doing it to make some sort of gain, potentially you could chalk that up as fraud, although I don't think it would get very far because they are saying it as part of their enforcement process, so they'll probably say that there's some reasonable justification, therefore it's not dishonest, so that probably wouldn't get very far. But at least I thought it was very interesting, because on one analysis it could meet the definition of fraud. So thank you for the comment, I enjoyed that one. The next one, very interesting and very similar actually, is can the BBC and its affiliates constantly send threatening letters without it being classed as harassment? Very interesting point, because the courts have decided that even the threat of legal action can amount to harassment, depending on how many times you're contacted and what the nature of those letters are. Now, I've seen some of these letters. In fact, I've done videos on them before. If I remember, I will link them in the description below. If I don't, shout at me in the comments and then I'll link them in the description below. I've done videos about this before where the wording of the letters are very harsh indeed. So much so that they could cause somebody unreasonable and unjustified alarm and distress, particularly if someone has declared that they do not need a license and they keep getting bombarded with really quite nastily worded letters. Then it's not too far a stretch to argue that this could amount to harassment, because if someone is receiving letter after letter after letter, but in fact they've already said they don't need a license, as I say, it wouldn't be a far stretch for a court to find that that could add up to harassment. But again, as with most cases like that, it would be fairly novel and it would require a test case to actually go to court. And because the judiciary is independent from the separation of powers principles that you'll learn 101 on a law degree, the judges don't need to consider the political implications, or at least they shouldn't be considering the political implications in their judgment. They would decide the law based on the set of facts as to whether it amounts to harassment or not. Meeting the definition of harassment is a course of conduct which is on at least 2 occasions, conduct which is going to amount to alarm and distress, which is more than the person of reasonable firmness should be expected to bear. That could well amount to harassment, so I'd be very interested to see a test case for that. The next question has a very simple answer. It says, what if you record a live TV program and watch it later? Well, that is precisely one of the definitions of requiring a TV license, watching or recording live TV. Then you do need a license. The next one is actually what I've contacted the press office about, because everywhere within the legislation and everywhere that it talks about it, including TV licensing website, is a little bit vague. My legal view on the legislation and the regulations and the way it's supposed to apply is that watching a live stream of an individual creator, such as myself, does not and should not require a TV license, because I am not a TV company. This is not a TV channel. This is not a TV program. This is not what the legislation is supposed to be there for. If you are watching a live stream of mine, you should not, in my view, require a TV license. Now, of course, this can't be legal advice, but this is my view nonetheless, and I'd be happy to argue that in court because it's not what the legislation is supposed to be there for. Nonetheless, I did contact the press office to say, what is your definitive view on exactly that scenario? Somebody watching an individual creator doing a live stream on YouTube. And secondly, which I think is very important because it's probably the most commonly asked question that there isn't a definitive answer to, I asked the press office, where is a member of the public able to find a definitive list of companies that do classify as a TV company for the purposes of a license? The response to both of my questions was a fairly generic one, which said, and I quote, "Thank you for your email. We'd refer you to Section 363 of the Communications Act 2003, which is, of course, the obligation to have a TV license, and Regulation 9 of the Communications Television Licensing Regulations 2004, which just says that for the purposes of the Act, licensing of TV reception, a television receiver means any apparatus installed or used for the purpose of receiving, whether by means of wireless telegraphy or otherwise, any television program service, whether or not installed or used for any other purpose." Well, my question was specifically whether any television program service can be defined in a definitive list. A definitive list of television program services, i.e., we all know that the BBC, ITV, Channel 4, Sky, etc., we know those are television companies. We know that they will be television program services. So if it is a live service from any one of the above, then yes, you need a license for the purposes of Regulation 9 and the Communications Act 2003. However, my question was, is there somewhere that a member of the public can see a definitive list of which companies that applies to? And the argument being, it should not include me, because I'm an independent creator. I am not a TV company. So as I said, the regulations are a little bit vague, but my interpretation of the law, for what it's worth, is that it should not and does not include me. So my response to the press office was that I'm familiar with both of those provisions, but you didn't answer my questions. They did come back to say they will come back to me on it. So hopefully they do come back to me on it and I can answer what they say is a definitive list of television program services. But that said, let's move on. Next question is, if you're watching a live stream on YouTube, but you watch it on a time delay of say 1 minute, is that still live for the same purpose? Yes, it is. Just pausing it and delaying it doesn't change the fact that it's a live broadcast. You would still need a TV license. The next one is a comment rather than a question. Not having a TV license is not a crime. I absolutely agree with you. Not having a license when you don't need one is not a crime. Although whenever statistics are referred to in publications, it seems to suggest that anyone that doesn't have a license is a license fee dodger. But I don't agree with that, because if you don't have a license because you don't need a license, you're not dodging the license, which sounds dishonest. You just don't have a license because you don't need a license. If you need a license and you don't have a license, then yes, you are dodging the license fee, and that is a crime currently. I believe it will get axed in a few years' time, but I'm not holding my breath. The next question says, surely nearly all programs are pre-recorded except the news bulletin. That might be the case, but that confuses the broadcast with a live sort of performance or whatever. Because if a program is pre-recorded but is broadcast live and received live, it's still a live broadcast. Obviously the news is somebody live talking as it's being broadcast, but even if something is pre-recorded and being broadcast, it's still a live broadcast if you follow the drift. So that still attracts a TV license requirement. The next one is, again, more of a comment, says that by that definition, YouTube and Twitch are platforms that you can broadcast live. I guarantee that the UK judgment will turn its attention to these platforms as their revenue is dropping. Sadly, I agree that that's a possibility, but I believe there would be vehement response from a great number of people because, as I've said a number of times, watching a live stream from me should not attract a TV license requirement. I am not a television service. I'm an individual creator creating videos on YouTube, and there's a license to watch it on YouTube. It's not TV, in my view. But as I said, I'll be interested in what the official response is from the press office when they come back to me. The next one is a slight misunderstanding in that it says, as I understood it, if you have equipment capable of receiving live broadcasts, then you need a license. This is a slight misunderstanding with respect on what the laws say. If the equipment has been installed for the purpose of receiving a live TV program, then yes, you're correct. If it's been installed just to watch catch-up or pre-recorded or Netflix or things of that nature which are not live broadcasts, then you don't. But how on earth someone's going to prove that someone had the intent when they installed the machinery to receive live TV? I don't know. Unless they're actually caught watching live TV, that would prove the intent that was installed for that purpose. Even then, there's an argument that it wasn't installed for that purpose, but used for that purpose later, even though the use of it later would attract the license. So if they're not paying for a license, then that makes it an offence. But again, unless they actually catch somebody watching it, I really don't see how anyone is going to prove that you've either used it for that purpose or installed it for that purpose. But there we go. The next one that I'll finish on, I thought quite comical, which is absolutely true. Again, more comments than questions. Says, what I'm not understanding is the rationale for all this. If I'm watching live ITV, why do I have to pay a license fee to the BBC? The response to that in the comment section was, because the government said so. No other rationale required. And sadly, I have to agree. That is the case. The legislation created by Parliament says if you watch any live TV whatsoever, even if it's from a TV station in India, if you're watching it in the UK, you need a TV license. That's what the legislation says, and yes, much of it goes to fund the BBC, the proportions of which I think I've dealt with in a previous video. Again, I'll try to link those. I'll probably link a playlist at this rate in the description below. But those were the few things that I wanted to address in this video, but particularly the fact that I've contacted the press office. Initially tried to bat me just to look at the legislation, which obviously I've already done, and in my view it doesn't include YouTube live streams of individual creators, whereas it would if it's a TV company. But I'll be very interested in what the official response is, because if there is an official response that contradicts what I've said, I believe some people might want to be challenging that in court. So in the meantime, if you found that interesting or entertaining in any way whatsoever, please do hit the like button and subscribe. I'm very, very nearly at 250,000 subscribers. 250,000 of you have hit that button so far. I'm on my way to 1 million. That's my ultimate goal. So in the meantime, thank you for watching.